Welcome to those who are here for the first time this morning. It's great to have you with us. I know we've got a few visitors or others who've just been here once or twice. It's lovely to have you. My name's Dan, I'm Vicar here, and it's my job now to explain that Bible reading which Francis has just read to us. But let me just get these high-quality visual aids ready first. And just before we delve into that Bible reading, I'm going to encourage us again to, and particularly if you weren't here last week, we mentioned this journey through John in 60 days, which is something we're starting tomorrow, something we'd love everyone to take part in. We're going to journey through John, looking at Jesus, and we'd love you to join with us. There we go, there's 4 J's this week. Join with the journey through John, looking at Jesus. Oh, I had it better when I was at home. Anyway, so the idea is that every day over the next couple of months, we all read the same short passage of John's Gospel. We're going to go right from the beginning, the sort of familiar Christmas readings, right through to the Easter readings, and we'll finish just before Easter time. And if you're someone who struggles to read the Bible by yourself, then I hope that actually knowing that loads of other people in the church congregation are doing it at the same time will inspire you and encourage you to do it. Or if you're the sort of person who does, you get an alert on your phone every day with a verse from the Bible. The alert on my phone this morning was, Jesus said, "I am the bread of life," which seemed very appropriate. If you get just a verse of the day on your phone or something like that, well, how about actually just reading, this is going to be like 20 verses or something like that, just to sort of begin to immerse yourself a little bit more in the story of John's Gospel, the wonderful story of Jesus that John wrote for us. So if you weren't here last week, we'll give you one of these on the way out. It explains how it works. All the readings are listed on the back. They're on the website as well if you want. There's some resources just to encourage you and help start you off. Unfortunately, the books haven't arrived yet, but we'll have those ready for next week. But they could just give a bit more background for those who want to dig a little bit deeper. But the main thing, of course, is just to be reading John's Gospel itself. And if you want, there's a WhatsApp group which people can join, and that's just a way to share what insights you have or to ask questions that you have from the readings as we go through. So we start John 1 tomorrow, and we'd love all of you to join with us. Now, let me turn to this passage, John 6. And this bread, I have to say, is freshly baked overnight. I did have another one from Sainsbury's, but our dog Alfie got hold of it last night. And when Alfie gets hold of food, there is no getting it off him. And obviously, I wasn't going to feed it to you anyway, once he had got his chores on it. So this was freshly baked overnight, and before you think, wow, what a culinary genius he is, we have a bread maker. Okay. Jesus said, "I am the bread of life." Now, I can imagine a conversation between a PR consultant and Jesus, and the PR consultant saying something like, "Jesus, this "I am the bread of life" thing isn't going to sell. It needs to be more exciting, more salivating and mouth-watering. You've got to show them what you're adding to their life as something sort of special and unique and enticing and appetizing for them. They don't need more bread. Everyone has got bread at home. You want to offer them something else. How about saying, well, look, I am the sirloin steak of life, or I'm the caviar of life, or I am the salmon for breakfast of life. The PR consultant can see he's not getting very far. How about, I am the gourmet Belgian chocolate brownies of life? Jesus shakes his head and says, I'll stick with bread, thank you. But why, says the PR consultant? Bread is so common, it's so ordinary, it's such basic food stuff. And Jesus nods and says, yes, that's the point. That's the point. You see, back in Jesus' day, bread was the staple diet, just as yam or maize or rice or whatever are staple diets in different cultures around the world. And the thing about a staple diet is, if you don't have it, you don't have particular alternatives. You couldn't pop down to Lidl and buy some rice or pasta or order a takeaway instead. If you didn't have bread on the table, if the crops failed, you died. You died. It was that simple. Bread was essential for life. And so Jesus, it doesn't claim to be the caviar of life, because he's saying, well, look, I'm not coming to bring a sort of a bonus extra, optional extra. I'm the bread of life because I am essential for life. Essential for life. It's what you need to survive. And he starts talking about bread at this point because, as we've just heard, Jesus had just fed 5,000 men from just one small packed lunch. You know, the crowds had been gathered, and people had been saying, well, he'd said to his disciples, where are we going to buy enough food for all these people? And one small boy turns up with just a few rolls and some fish and that sort of thing. And Jesus begins to break it and put it into baskets, and they pass it round, and everyone has enough. And of course, it's not just 5,000 men, there's women and children, so maybe it's 10,000 people. And there's left over as well. And so people who are hungry, they know they need this staple diet. And Jesus has just fed 10,000 people from one small packed lunch. And then he says, I am the bread of life. And they're interested. They're very interested. He got their attention. And so they go searching for Jesus. And Jesus says, very truly I tell you, you are looking for me, not because you saw the signs I performed, but because you ate the loaves and had your fill. He's saying, look, you saw what I did with the bread, but you didn't really see what that was pointing to. It was a sign. And it was a miracle, and the miracles, the signs, always point to something. I mean, imagine a tourist getting on a bus, heading towards the New Forest, and they see the signpost which says New Forest, and they get out of the bus, and they look at the sign, and they say, oh, great, I've always wanted to see the New Forest. And then they cross over the road and get on and wait for the bus home. It would be ridiculous, wouldn't it? You don't come to look at the sign. You come to see what it's pointing to. And these people were missing. They'd had their fill, but they were missing what it was really pointing to about who Jesus is. And Jesus knows that they need physical bread, and so he's fed them. But because he loves them, he knows they need something more as well. And so he says, verse 27, don't work for food that spoils, but for food that endures. In effect, he's saying, look, you're thinking too small. Your desires are too small. You want physical bread, but physical bread goes off after a few days. It goes moldy. You need bread which lasts, bread which goes on forever. Now, years gone by, people used to describe themselves as breadwinners, didn't they? What they meant was, they earned the money so they could put bread on the table, so the family could eat. For some people, getting food on the table is still a real struggle. They are literally the breadwinners. That's what they get up for in the morning, is so they can have enough food on the table for everyone to eat. But for most people these days, actually, they can put food on the table, but it's some of the extra things which they really get out of bed for in the morning. They want to be able to keep the Netflix subscription, or they want to be able to have a nice holiday later in the year, or they want to find a nicer house, or whatever it is. That's what really gets them out of bed in the morning. And Jesus is saying to us, look, all of these things are good. Bread and holidays and all these things are good, but they're not the ultimate thing, are they? They're not what you're really after. You can have Netflix, but then your favorite series ends. It's like bread that goes moldy in a few days. Or you can have a nice holiday, but then it's just a memory, and you can't do it again. Or you get a better house, but then it develops a leak, and you realize the neighbors are a real pain. These things are all, yes, you can look forward to them, but they wear out. They go moldy. They don't satisfy. You're working for things that spoil. They go off, Jesus says. Jim Carrey, the comedy actor, once said, everybody should get rich and famous and do everything they ever dreamed of so they can see that's not the answer. There's a man who's realized that he's been working for food that spoils. It goes off. It's not the answer. It doesn't satisfy deep down. And so Jesus lovingly points out to us that we need food that endures for eternal life. Something that will keep us going both now and even through death itself. And we all have this innate longing, don't we? For life to be about more than just this life. C.S. Lewis wrote, "We long for something that no marriage, no travel, no learning can ever satisfy. If I find in myself a desire that no experience in this world can ever satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world." He's saying that even when the best relationship or the best holiday leave us thinking, that's not quite what I was after. It doesn't quite fulfill all my needs. He's saying that's a clue to us that we're working for food that spoils, not food that will endure to eternal life. So what are you working for? Are you working for food that spoils? Or are you working for food that endures to eternal life? Now, I'm no Greek scholar, but let me just delve into the original Greek just for a moment, because sometimes our English Bible translations don't quite pick up the nuance that there is there in the Greek. So apparently there are two different Greek words which get translated as life in English. There's bios, from which we get the word biology, and that's the sort of life which means existence. Something is alive. And then there's zoe, which is like the real life, the life to the full, the life and soul of the party, that sort of life. The life that really counts and means something to us. And it's possible to have bios, existence, without zoe, the real life which gets you up in the morning, enthuses you. Maybe some of you feel that's where you're at the moment. You've got the bios, you've got existence, you're alive, you get up, you go to work, you eat, you sleep, and you repeat, but you haven't really got zoe, you haven't really got a life which satisfies deep down. It's possible to have bios without zoe. And Jesus here is talking about food that gives eternal zoe, life with joy, life with purpose and meaning and so on, a richness to life. Not eternal bios, eternal existence, that sounds a bit like hell, but an eternal zoe, a life with richness to it. And eternal life is life with God, which starts now. It doesn't start when we die, it starts now, and it endures beyond death. And some of you might think, well, life with God sounds as though it's something less than what I have at the moment. Life with God sounds as though it's going to sort of cramp my style and limit me and inhibit me. But no, zoe, eternal, this real life is always something more than what we currently imagine it to be. I mean, picture a beached whale. It's such a sad sight, isn't it? A whale isn't made to be on the beach. A whale is made to be in the ocean where it can roam free and do everything it's supposed to. And when we think that actually a life with God would inhibit us, it's a bit like saying, well, look, we're that beached whale. It's not how we're supposed to be. We're designed to be with life with God just as a whale is designed for the ocean. We're made for zoe, not just bios. And I read the story recently of Caressa Dion Spencer. She grew up as a Christian and spent 10 years leading youth groups and preaching and that sort of thing. But then she said that over the years, her Christian faith, denying herself for God, had begun to feel like this straitjacket, robbing her of pleasure. And so in 2020, she says she resigned from Christianity. She started denying God for herself. And she says, for the next 2 years, I embarked on what I can only call a world tour. A tour of all that I believed the world had to offer. Queer love, polyamory, sex, drugs, and the worship of other gods. I said yes to everything I had once denied myself. And in saying yes, I thought I had found freedom. And she carries on, for a while it felt good, but soon the high faded. The freedom that once tasted so sweet became bitter. The drugs, the sex, the defiance, none of it brought the peace I'd been searching for. Instead, I found myself floating, not on calm waters, but in a vast empty darkness like outer space. There was nothing solid to hold on to. I looked free from the outside, but I knew the truth. I was lost. And in her despair, she was on the brink of taking her own life, when in fear she found herself praying, God, help me. First prayer she'd prayed in years. And the prayer was answered immediately in various ways. She surrendered to God. And she says this, the following day, everything was different. The God I had walked away from, the God I thought I had rejected, had never left me. He was there, listening, waiting for me to call on him again. Ever since then, I tell God everything, my fears, my doubts, my questions, my pleasures, my weaknesses, my aches, my desires. Everything I once tried to hide, I now bring to him. I don't pretend anymore. Instead, I let him into every part of me, and in return, he gives me peace. Amazing story. And listen to what she says at the end. Self-denial sounds oppressive to the self. It seems like saying yes to every thought and feeling and desire will lead us to discovery of our true selves, but actually that will only lead to the soul's decay. I now know that the only way to find your life is to lose it. Now, do you see what was going on in her heart? She was searching for Zoe, real life. But she tried finding it by working for food that spoiled. And so she landed up with just bios, life, existence. And when she realized that was all she had, she didn't even want that. And she wanted to take her own life. But then by God's grace, she found Zoe, the real life, in Jesus. In Jesus. So eternal life, Zoe life, is life with God is always something more, and it's never something less than what we have at the moment. Don't work for food that spoils in the hope that it will give you something more, because actually it will just leave your soul decaying and feeling empty and hungry. So Jesus' listeners say, verse 28, okay then, what must we do to do the work God requires? It's a typical response, isn't it? What must we do if we're going to get this eternal life? Do I need to give more to charity? Do I need to give up, smoking and alcohol or whatever? Do I need to go to church more? And Jesus answered, no, the work of God is this, to believe in the one he has sent. You don't need to do anything, you just need to believe, to trust in the one he sent. So they asked him, well, what sign then will you give that we may see it and believe you? We're supposed to think, come on guys, Jesus the day before has just fed 10,000 people as a miracle, and you want a sign? That's just the proof that they missed what the signpost was pointing to, isn't it? They couldn't see it even though it was right in front of them. And then they go on to talk about one of the defining moments in Israel's history, when the Israelites had been wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. And God had provided manna from heaven for them each day, or 6 days a week, bread that they could eat. And Jesus says, look, that bread from heaven was pointing to the true bread from heaven. That bread just gave life to the Jewish people. The life that I give, that brings life to the world. And they say, sir, give us this bread then. And that's when Jesus says, I am the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. And do you see what he's doing? He's not claiming that he's going to give them the bread of life. He's saying he is in himself the bread of life. He's not claiming that he'll give them bread that leads to eternal life. He is that life. That if we have Jesus, we have all we need. And just as the manna sustained the people of Israel for their journey through the wilderness until they reached their new home, the promised land, so the true bread from heaven, Jesus, sustains us, the people of God, through the wilderness of this life until we get to our new home, life with God in heaven, the life that we were made for. And so what is it about Jesus that uniquely makes him be able to say, I am the bread of life? Two things. First, he's the bread of life because he's come from God. He says, I have come down from heaven. I've come down from heaven, not to do my will, but to do the will of him who sent me. For my Father's will is that everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him shall have eternal life. And I will raise them up at the last day. A bit later, when he's when he says that what he's offering is an even greater miracle than the manna in the wilderness miracle, he says, look, your ancestors ate the manna in the wilderness, yet they died. But here is the bread that comes down from heaven, which anyone may eat and not die. I am the living bread that came down from heaven. Whoever eats this bread will live forever. So do you see, time and again, he's saying that he's come from heaven. Now, maybe you have colleagues or family members who say, well, yeah, maybe Jesus was a great moral teacher. He said some fantastic things, but I don't believe he's from God. Well, this is one of the places where Jesus is really clearly saying, I am from God. I am. That's why the bread I'm offering to you is able to get you through life, because I'm from God. And so he's uniquely the bread of life because he's come from God, but he's also uniquely the bread of life because just as a loaf of bread is broken, so Jesus was broken for us. You see, he goes on to be really quite gory in what he says. We didn't have this bit read out, but it's a little bit later on in the chapter. Indeed, some of the early opponents of Christianity accused the Christians of cannibalism because of these very verses. This bread is my flesh, which I will give for the life of this world. Very truly, I tell you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. The one who feeds on me will live because of me. Now, I don't know about you, but those verses make me squirm a bit. Eating Jesus' flesh, drinking his blood. But you see, Jesus is saying that the life that he gives doesn't primarily come through his teaching, or through his miracles, or through his example, but actually through his death for us. His body, the bread of life, was broken, ripped apart for me and for you. He's saying, look, you might not realize it, but you're not just physically hungry, but you're spiritually hungry. When you make a mess of your life and other people's lives and our world, that's just a symptom of the brokenness of your relationship with God. And it's broken in such a way that we can't fix it, he says. Only God can. And Jesus says, look, that's why I've come. I'm going to be broken so that I can fix you. We can't fix our own mess. No, in his love, he fixes it for us. He dies so we can live. Nobody else can be the bread of life for us because nobody else has died for us and let their body be broken for us. And so when we eat bread and drink wine in communion services, we're saying, look, Jesus, I want to feed on you because I need you. There is no other bread of life like you are the bread of life. I need you because I can't get through death by myself. I can't get through life by myself. I need you. I'm desperate for you. I'm broken and hopeless without you. But because you suffered, I can be healed. Because your relationship with God was broken, my relationship with God can be healed. I'm feasting on you, Jesus, because you are my only hope. So what's the takeaway from today? Well, it's simply this: feast on Jesus. Feast on him. Don't settle for anything less, because anything less is a food that spoils. Feast on Jesus desperately, a bit like our dog feasted on that bread desperately last night. He wasn't going to let go of that bread, and we shouldn't let go of Jesus. Feast on him desperately. And if you used to feast on Jesus in the past, but actually, if you're honest, you've been munching and nibbling on other bits of food recently, well, recognize them for what they are, food that spoils, and come back to Jesus. If, like Caressa Dion Spencer, you've never really surrendered to Jesus, well, there's no time like the present. Don't just admire Jesus, don't just sing songs to Jesus, but feast on him. Feast on him. His presence with us, his word to us in the Bible, his body broken for us, his never-ending love and mercy and grace towards us. And as you feast on Jesus, and only as you feast on Jesus, listen to these most wonderful promises that he makes. Whoever comes to me, I will never drive away. Everyone who looks to the Son and believes in him shall have eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. Whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise them up at the last day. There's no limit on those promises, is there? Whoever comes to Jesus, you can't be too young or too old. You can't have the wrong background or the wrong history or the wrong sexuality. You can't say, I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy enough. Jesus says, whoever comes to me, I will never turn away. And if you feasted on Jesus, please never say something like, well, I hope I'll go to heaven when I die. No. We can be far more confident than that. Far more confident. We can be certain because Jesus says, whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life. It's already started. Death is just the blip to get us into the next bit. And I will raise them up at the last day. There's no quibbles there. He doesn't say, I might raise them up. I will raise them up. So as you feast on Jesus, remember those wonderful promises, which are true for everyone who feasts on him.